Stop. Go to 7. 8. 9.
Warner Brothers' Dune is a new sci-fi epic where Paul Atreides of House Atreides travels to take control of this valuable desert planet, where he then immediately gets betrayed by a rival house and runs off into the desert to find the desert people. And that's it. So pretty simple in terms of plot. And the very interesting thing about Dune's existence is its strong similarity to Blade Runner 2049, and not such a financial success from a few years ago. Both of them adapt old properties that studio executives like to think still carry more fanbase value than they actually do. Both are about expensive futuristic dystopian worlds where the hero may or may not be the chosen one destined to free the people. Both of them were even masterminded by the same visual-driven fanboy director.
The movie I watched the most, probably Blade Runner is one of them.
I was like a teenager that I found this in a bookstore and I fell in love spontaneously with it.
And the reason all that's worth bringing up here is because Blade Runner 2049 became kind of a cautionary tale of how not to make a big Hollywood blockbuster. Like, I personally enjoyed it a lot, but as we covered in a video before, it does suffer from a few major blockbuster weaknesses that specifically prevented it from appealing to general audiences like a film of its scale needs to. And so for Warner's and Legendary to lose money on that and then immediately put up another $160 million on a project that's almost like an alternate version of it, it's as if Dune was destined to be the exact same financial failure. Fortunately though, the performance is looking much better, even in a much tougher market. And while there are some more obvious reasons for this, like the cast being more commercial, it also seems like director Denis Villeneuve took lessons from last time that allowed him to make a more successful blockbuster. Now, is Dune a better film than Blade Runner 2049 overall? I'll leave that up to you, but it does definitely improve on it in this specific area in a way that's very useful to take a closer look at. And so today, let's do that. Let's compare Dune to Blade Runner and identify the key ways it addresses its main blockbuster flaws that we covered before. And also some of the ways it doesn't, because there are some pretty big identical problems here as well. Obviously, I love Villeneuve's work as much as everyone else, but I also feel like the negatives here are too valuable to just not learn from, like was the case last time, so hopefully that's okay. And just in case it isn't, I'll try to make up for any excessive negativity with another giveaway of Displates, your favorite metal sheet posters. I got a whole new batch including designs like Dune and Venom, as well as ones from their official Star Wars and MCU and Fox property collections that I'll be giving away globally this time. So no matter where you live, just leave a comment like you normally would and include your Twitter that you're momentarily following me with, and I'll pick out a few winners. Display was also willing to sponsor another special 2-week Filmento audience discount of 31 to 37% off everything on their site, so check them out because they have an endless amount of cool designs from movies to games to everything else, with an ever-growing list of big-name official partners. All the designs are printed on metal, which makes them really high quality and easy to hang up and swap out in a few seconds. Just put a magnet with a protective leaf on the wall and that's it. So yeah, the discount is once again just for 2 weeks, so make use of it with the link below, where you'll also see some designs I recommend, and maybe you'll find something for you or for someone else for Christmas. Anyway, hopefully that buys me some slack. The first key blockbuster problem with 2049 was its over-reliance on visuals, which made it feel very slow. There weren't really many obstacles we were overcoming. There wasn't much conflict or actions or stuff happening. Most of the film consisted of our hero Kay going to a really gorgeous looking place to get information and then just like getting it.
Then 10 days of darkness. Every machine stopped cold.
Speaking to Denis about what happened with Blade Runner, it's a wonderful movie, but it didn't perform to its expectations. No. What do you attribute that to personally in looking at it?
It's slow.
And initially, Dune does suffer from the exact same issue. Aside from a couple exceptions, we don't really get proper scenes of conflict and problems as much as we get very aesthetically impressive moments of information. Whether it's learning lessons,
only the native tribes known as the Fremen have adapted well enough.
Whether it's setting up a supernatural skill,
Give me the water. Almost.
Whether it's having a ceremony for a shift of power that we have to do nothing for,
Why do we have to go through all this when it's already been decided?
Or whether it's discussing plans or meeting friends or, as a great example, arriving on planet Dune.
Shield!
All this time we've been hearing ominous talk about how dangerous this planet is, and now that we finally arrive, nothing happens. There's no assassination attempt, no confrontation with the locals, not even a hint of a problem we need to solve to move to the next step. We just arrive on a ship to hear that the problems have been solved.
My advance team has secured the city.
We walk into another ship to wonder about something we heard.
What are they shouting?
Listen, Al-Gaib, voice from the outer world.
And then we fly to our headquarters. That's it. That's 7 minutes of screen time. And for general audiences, that's not good enough. It doesn't matter how cool the visuals, if nothing is actually happening within those visuals, or if what's happening is over before it even fully begins, it can very easily come across as slow and boring. But soon after, things do take a turn, as is signaled by our first venture into the desert. Essentially, our heroes are out to check out their spice mining operation when a giant sandworm shows up for dinner. And just like that, we have a situation. We need to save the workers and get out, or we're all gonna be worm food, and we have until the worm arrives. It might be a bit surface level, but there's a goal, stakes, urgency. It's an actual movie scene about an obstacle being overcome. And quickly after this, our heroes then get ambushed by a rival house, which kinda by default turns the whole thing into conflict mode. Now we're constantly fighting to get to where we need to go. Now we're constantly running from death. Now we finally have a clear overall objective of finding the desert people. And compared to what's going on in Blade Runner at this time, I wonder which feels more generally exciting.
We could keep it this or we could get a drink.
But just to showcase that the main point here isn't explosions and loud noises, I'll give a couple more examples, like this scene where Paul and his mom, Lady Jessica, have been taken by enemy soldiers.
Let's feed the kid to the worms.
What we have here is a situation. Paul needs to use his supernatural voice skill to free them, or they're gonna be thrown out to die, and he has until being thrown out. Like, this is a fantastic scene. This is an intense challenge that the audience can watch Paul try to get through at the edge of their seat.
Do it! Do it! Come on! Come on! Do it now!
Kill him!
And to build on this, look at the scene where Paul's dad, Duke Leto, has lost the battle and meets the Baron of the rival house. On the surface, this might seem like another slow talking moment, but because the movie has set up that Leto has a poisoned tooth in his mouth, it transforms into something more. Leto has to get close enough to the Baron to poison him so that he can deliver at least some kind of a blow to the enemy, and he has only this one shot at it. No explosions, no loud noises, but still intense excitement over whether Leto can overcome this challenge he's currently facing.
What did you say?
And I really urge you to watch this film with this in mind and compare the difference between the first hour and the rest. If it feels like the latter is less slow and more exciting, even if you're watching on a tiny screen where the visuals don't matter, this could be why. The second blockbuster issue with Blade Runner was its love of unsatisfying conclusions. Some things were not concluded at all, like the main villain who just disappeared without any closure, whereas other things were concluded sort of meaninglessly, like the hero not being important.
You imagined it was you.
And central characters dying for no bigger purpose.
Where is he? I have no idea.
And And even though Dune plays out in a very similar melancholy way, it still manages to offer a good amount of satisfaction. The plot, for example, is and always remains about Paul. When the movie gets us invested in his journey of seeking justice for his family, that journey is as long as the movie itself. It's not like Paul finds the desert people and then hears that, oh, you and your family don't actually matter. The real journey here is about us and our cause. No, the name Atreides is what we can root for to the end.
My father came, not for the riches, but for the strength of your people. My road leads into the desert.
Then we also have the character stuff, which again includes a lot of dying, like is the case with this final scene with Duke Leto. But while Leto has been totally defeated and humiliated, he doesn't just go out. Before he goes, he takes one last poisonous breath that injures the Baron and kills his guards and personal advisor. So even though it hurts seeing Oscar Isaac go out this early, it's not for nothing. There's something we get from his story's conclusion. Same with Duncan Idaho. When he and Paul get attacked in a desert hideout, he steps up to fight and fight until his last breath. And again, while it is a bummer for everyone to see Jason Momoa go out so early, it's not for nothing. His journey ends so that Paul's can continue. That's what this conclusion gives us. And whether it's the Chosen One storyline that allows Paul and his mom to survive the invasion, or Duke Leto's kindness toward the locals,
Damn the spice! I want every man off that crawler now!
that convinces the ambassador to help his son, attaching this kind of bigger, conclusive meaning to things to justify the time spent on them is very crucial. Because when it's not there, then we get stuff like the ending here, where essentially Paul and his mom successfully find the desert people, which then leads to Paul having to prove himself in a fight to the death.
I'll beat the goofy out your ass, boy.
And while it's implied that it's a big deal because Paul has never taken a life,
Paul has never killed a man.
this has never been established as an actual meaningful weakness. So in other words, this massive blockbuster's final climax is that our main character has to fight a random dude he just met for no real significantly constructed reason, and then it just desperately tries to sell the unconfirmed sequel and ends.
This is only the beginning.
And if you argue that it's like this because that's how it's in the book from 60 years ago, fair enough, but this movie isn't a book, and today isn't 60 years ago. Like the Fellowship of the Ring, for example, has a very similar ending where the overall journey only starts, but it still finds a way to create a meaningful conclusion by introducing this orc. See, this orc doesn't exist in the book, but by creating him specifically to be the face for the army that pursues our heroes, by having him kill a prominent member of the Fellowship, that attaches the finale with significance. When Aragorn takes this orc on one-on-one, he's obviously not landing any blows on the main villains, but because the orc in this movie has been positioned as a sort of proxy for them, it still feels like he does. And with the killing blow, we do get a satisfying closure for this movie. And Dune should have found a similar way. Whether it's Batista or a whole new character, position someone as a proxy face for the evil side for this movie. He's instrumental in the fall of House Atreides. He's the one who kills Duncan Idaho. He chases Paul and his mom throughout the runtime until at the end Paul finally has to take him on one-on-one. That way, when Paul ends his life, it doesn't conclude the whole story of Dune, but it does still offer a meaningful, satisfying conclusion for the story we've been on in Dune Part 1.
That's just one example, of course. Other things like Paul's first kill and fighting a Freeman can work great, so long as they are made a big enough part of this story to be able to conclude it.
Because if your movie and things in it end by just kind of ceasing to exist, for more general audiences looking for a satisfying experience, that might be a problem. The third blockbuster issue with Blade Runner was its extreme subtlety that made it difficult to emotionally invest in. Whether it's the plot about saving other replicants without it being made clear what replicants are or what exactly they need to be saved from, or whether it's many of the characters being often so reserved about their feelings that it can be a bit unclear whether those feelings even exist, especially with the main hero. Whereas in Dune, things are much more upfront. With the plot, for example, there's no question about what we're doing or why. Like, the atrocities committed against House Atreides on screen are so unfairly horrendous that it's very clear why we need to run for our lives, why we need to find a way to fight back. Everyone in the audience understands what is the great injustice in need of correction. Some could even argue that it's all a bit too upfront, to the point where the good guys are so obviously good and bad guys so obviously bad that it's almost cartoony. Then we have the character side, where emotions for the most part are much easier to grasp and relate to. People express sadness when they lose everything. They express shock when they might lose everything. They fear, they rage, they hesitate, they laugh. I mean, just compare Batista's first words and maybe you'll get the idea.
Grow that just for me. Garlic.
Garlic.
Take everything we've built and give it to that dude! How?
And to highlight why it is so important to be clear about emotions, take for example the main relationship between Paul and his mom, Lady Jessica. Early on, there's a scene where the leader of Jessica's supernatural women's club comes over to test Paul on whether he should be allowed to live with his abilities or not. And Jessica makes that possible.
Bye, have a great time.
She willfully endangers her son in a way that indicates her feelings toward him to be non-comparable to her beliefs.
No need to call the guards. Your mother stands behind that door. No one will get past her.
Until we see this. Right, so when Jessica fears and squirms along with Paul, that makes it clear that, okay, she does care about him a lot. That she's in fact very emotionally torn between these two pillars of her life. And it's that knowledge of her inner conflict that fills her and her relationship with Paul with emotion. Whereas if she just stood blankly and hid her feelings from the audience the same way she hides them from other characters, for the audience none of it would exist. Look at, for example, how that moment affects this tent scene later on, where the two of them have escaped the invasion and where Paul is now finally starting to lose it completely, accusing his mom of not being such a great mom.
You are my son. You are the Duke.
Get off me! You did this to me! You Bene Gesserit made me a freak!
The reason these words can really hit the audience is because we understand how much they hit Jessica. We know how much she actually cares about her son and how tough this topic is for her. We can feel her pain because we know it's there. But if we didn't know, if she was always super subtle and reserved about those feelings, none of this would feel like anything. And so what I'm trying to get across is that the emotions the audience feels comes from the feelings the characters express. It's powerful to see Paul get mad about his mom being mistreated.
You dismissed my mother in her own house.
It's powerful to see Paul teach his mom about desert survival the same way she taught him about using the voice.
Can you breathe through this?
The reason we care about them and their relationship is because we know how much they care about each other. And to be clear, I'm not saying there's no emotion in Blade Runner. I'm not saying Dune is a better movie than Blade Runner. I'm just saying that in Dune, it's much easier for your parents who go see 2 movies a year to get on board, emotionally as well as in other ways we discussed. And from modern blockbusters that need to make $1 gazillion to please the studio executives, casual filmgoers like your parents are the type they most need to convince to show up, in which Dune does do a better job.